Hello, everybody, and welcome from Vienna. I'm delighted to be the host of this session, and my name is Iris Kaltenecker, and I'm an architect and founder from Open House Vienna. So what's the program of the next hour? We are visiting two cities, namely London and Vienna, and we will be looking at two projects there. The setting of these projects at first glance might be quite different in regards of scale, for example. In Vienna, we are introduced to one of the biggest urban development in Europe, and in London, it's on a neighborhood scale. And also in regards of the context. So in London, it's a project which is embedded in the existing urban fabric, and it's embedded in the London center area, whereas in Vienna, it's a completely new development on the outskirts of the town. So even so, the situation is different. The goals is the same, namely to enable an inclusive and mixed neighborhood and good living conditions. So what are the approaches and the processes and the critical parameters for this to happen, for this to be grounded, and also for the next decades to come? So what can we learn from each other? What differs? What can we compare? What works well, what doesn't, and so on. So this is what we will explore in our talk with Paul Karakusevic of Karakusevic Carson Architects, and with Kurt Hochstetter, director of the International Building Exhibition in Vienna. But before we do that, two films will set the scene. First, we see a video about Aspern Seestadt, urban lakeside Aspern, and also in particular about the co-housing project. And then we go to London and we see a video about Colville Estate in the borough of Hackney. So enjoy the videos and join us for the discussion afterwards.
Seestadt. Umsteigen zu 84a, 88a, 88b. Wir sind
Im Nordosten von Wien auf einem ehemaligen Flugfeld wird seit 2013 die Seestadt Aspern gebaut. Es ist eines der größten Stadtentwicklungsgebiete Europas. In mehreren Etappen sollen Wohnraum für 25.000 Menschen und über 20.000 Arbeits- sowie Ausbildungsplätze entstehen. Ein gewaltiges Unterfangen. Einzelne Quartiere sind um einen zentralen See angeordnet und mit einer Ringstraße verbunden. Der Masterplan stammt vom schwedischen Büro Taiwan Architects. Zusätzlich wurde er mit einem Freiraumkonzept von GEL Architekten überlagert. Gemeinsam ergeben sie einen Werkzeugkoffer, der die Planung der ganzen Seestadt am Maßstab der Nachbarschaften entwickelt. Zuerst wurde die U-Bahn-Linie errichtet und so eine gute öffentliche Anbindung sichergestellt. Danach entstanden die ersten Wohngebäude. Sie sind rund um den Hannah-Arendt-Quartierspark angeordnet. Zusätzlich befinden sich hier zwei Schulen, das Quartiersmanagement, eine Bäckerei, Restaurants und vieles mehr. Eine lebendige Erdgeschosszone zeugt von einer gelungenen Stadtatmosphäre. Diese wird natürlich auch von aktiven Bewohnerinnen mitgetragen.
Wir sind die Verein Seestadt Grün und begrünen hier die Seestadt. Wir haben hier eine Pergola gebaut und wir haben dann ein Gießrad, eine Erfindung eigentlich, womit wir hier Flächen pflegen können, begießen können. Es ist wichtig, dass Bewohner hier mitmachen und dass sie sich identifizieren mit ihrem Wohnumfeld. Wir errichten hier diese Fläche und pflegen auch gemeinsam. Es werden hier Staudenbeete sein mit auch Sträucher, teilweise essbare Pflanzen, Kletterpflanzen, auch Weintrauben, Trompetenblumen, Kiwi. Ja, das ist ein Experiment eigentlich.
In der Seestadt Aspern sind neue Konzepte Programm. Ein willkommener Nährboden für die internationale Bauausstellung IBA Wien. Diese geht den Fragen nach dem Wohnen von morgen nach. Sie begleitet viele Projekte im Quartier am Seebogen, das sich gerade in Fertigstellung befindet.
Wenn ich mir überlege, wie wohnen wir morgen, dann ist speziell hier in dem Gebiet in der Seestadt, am Quartier am Seebogen, ein Thema ganz im Vordergrund, das ist die Quartiersentwicklung. Wir sehen, wie sich das aufs Wohnen auswirkt. Wir haben ganz verschiedene Nutzungen auf engem Raum, können davon profitieren. Die Menschen haben einen tollen Park hier direkt vor der Nase, das ist mitten unter der U-Bahn-Trasse. Dann haben wir die Bibliothek, die Boulderbar, da hinten gibt es die Kulturgarage. Ein Jugendzentrum, all das ist sehr eng verknüpft und das Wichtige dabei ist, dass das in der Entwicklungsphase einfach schon gut abgestimmt wird. Dann kann das Wohnen einfach gut funktionieren, weil es einfach Vielfalt gibt und weil es viele Synergien gibt. Also das Spannende hier in der Seestadt finde ich, dass es immer wieder gelingt, ganz verschiedene Akteure und Akteurinnen zusammenzubringen. Das macht eine bunte Vielfalt aus. Das führt zu einer Mischung, die einfach spannend ist.
Zahlreiche Wohnbaumodelle finden in der Seestadt Platz. Neben dem geförderten Wohnbau, der Wohnbauinitiative und frei finanzierten Projekten gibt es mehrere Baugruppen sowie studentisches und betreutes Wohnen.
Man freut sich, dass es fertig ist, aber das eigentlich Interessante ist, wie entwickelt sich das? In der ersten Phase der Seestadt hat man gesehen, dass sich manche Dinge ganz anders entwickeln, als man sich vorgenommen hatte oder als man gedacht hatte. Da kommen neue Player plötzlich auf den Plan, die sind wirklich aktiv, die greifen was an und bewegen was. Und das muss man abwarten. Wichtig ist, dass man Raum bietet dafür, dass sich wirklich etwas tun kann.
Eine aktive Playerin ist sicherlich die Architektin Freya Brandl. Sie ist Mitinitiatorin des Baugruppenmodells Kollokation, das sich dem gemeinsamen Wohnen von Alt und Jung verschreibt.
Kollokation, gemeinsam urban wohnen. Da sage ich noch dazu, dass uns das Urban schon wichtig ist, weil wir sagen, wenn man älter ist, möchte man einfach leicht zu Veranstaltungen gehen können oder Kurse besuchen oder noch ein bisschen arbeiten können oder so. Ne?
Die Jüngeren können von der Erfahrung der Älteren profitieren und diese von der Vitalität der Jugend. Das Konzept adressiert ältere Menschen ab 50, Alleinerziehende und junge Leute. Aber nun von Anfang an. Wie kam es dazu, dass die Baugruppe Kollokation heute mit 41 Wohneinheiten in der Seestadt steht und von unterschiedlichsten Generationen bezogen ist?
Ich habe relativ viel Fläche verbraucht und habe gewusst, aus Nachhaltigkeitsgründen ist es nicht gut, wenn eine Person 120 Quadratmeter hat für sich und einen Garten. Und dann kam das Zweite, dass natürlich ich auch gedacht habe, ich war schon 60 plus und habe mir gedacht, wie geht denn das weiter? Soll ich da alleine leben? Noch dazu im Grünen, abseits oder weiter weg von der Stadt, wo halt viel los ist. Und wollte also unbedingt gemeinschaftlich irgendwo wohnen. und habe dann Reisen unternommen nach Skandinavien, nach Schottland, nach Holland, nach Deutschland und habe in Gemeinschaftsprojekten Probe gewohnt und wäre am liebsten dort geblieben, weil ich gefunden habe, das ist optimal. Und dann bin ich nach Wien zurück und habe mir gedacht, oh je, da gibt es gar nichts. Irgendwann habe ich mit Peter Bleier einen Verein gegründet und der heißt Kollokation. Und dieser Verein ist sozusagen der Anfang, da haben wir halt über Stammtische Leute akquiriert und gefunden, eigentlich vorwiegend Frauen, muss man sagen, weil gerade die Frauen können sich nicht vorstellen, wie das einmal ist, wenn sie älter sind und alleine leben. Sie wollen alleine leben, aber nicht ganz alleine und nicht einsam sein.
Oh, schön.
Es gibt am Sonntag unten ein Frühstück, das ist im Flexraum, das ist offen für das ganze Haus. Und hier heroben haben wir unsere Zusammenkünfte, also unsere Sitzungen halt. Und ansonsten, wer halt Lust hat, etwas zu machen, der macht was.
Ja, also ich war jetzt gerade beim See unten und bin eine Runde spazieren gegangen und habe jemanden beobachtet, der in den See eingesprungen ist. Und mit dem habe ich mir morgen um 12 Uhr ausgemacht, dass ich das auch machen werde.
Ich bin relativ spät hier eingezogen, was ja, mich erinnert an Freyers Argumentation in Bezug auf Nachhaltigkeit. Ich habe auch in einer billigen Altbauwohnung in einer größeren vorher gelebt und Freyer hat immer argumentiert, es ist schon allein dadurch nachhaltig, wenn die älteren Leute dann dort ausziehen, dass billiger Wohnraum für junge Familien und so geschaffen wird.
Aktuell sind ca. 30% der Seestadt fertiggestellt. Viele neue spannende Projekte stehen kurz vor der Realisierung. Bis in die 2030er Jahre wird die Seestadt noch weiter wachsen.
95a, 99a, 99b, S-Bahn, Regionalzüge, Ausstieg links.
Hello everyone, and thank you to Open House and Open City for getting us involved in this wonderful weekend of discussion on housing. My name is Paul Karakusevic, founding partner of Karakusevic Carson Architects, and I'm going to speak today about the Colville Estate in Hackney, which is a wonderful project we've been working on with the residents and Hackney Council over the past 15 years. London contains 32 boroughs. I'm going to talk a little bit about Hackney Council today. You can see outlined in the black on the plan just north of the river. One of the most populous councils in London with upwards of 300,000 residents. So here's Hackney in a little bit more detail. You'll see the large north-south spine road. And then lots of very, very generous big parks and open spaces, and many neighbourhoods of very strong, well-made Victorian streets, and also lots of 1950s, 1960s, early 1970s council estates within the whole borough. So we're working extensively with the borough. We've got 4 major projects with the council at the moment, generally long-term schemes. on big housing estate projects, some involving refurbishment, some involving refurbishment and infill, some like the Colville, which is essentially a rebuilding program, which has been very focused and shaped by the residents of the Colville estate. So here's Hoxton from the air in 1953. And the Colville estate, the 1950s element of the Colville estate is circled on the left of your screen. Here you go in plan. So the canal, the Regent Canal, is just running to the north. To the south of the Colville, we have a collection of public buildings, including the school, the leisure centre, a primary school, and little outcrops of Victorian housing. And then directly south of that, we have Shoreditch Park. Some existing photos of the old Colville, some of the four-storey examples of the mansion blocks. Generally, outwardly, they don't look too bad. Inwardly, the residents for many decades have been complaining about cramped living conditions, damp spaces, rooms that are not really fit for modern living, kitchens and bathrooms that are too small, and then a rather underwhelming public realm of haphazard car parking, doors just spilling out into these grey spaces, and fairly unused, unloved green spaces. So very early on, we started an exercise working with the local residents and the community. Lots of engagement, lots of consultation events, lots of design workshops and meetings, working through options and scenarios with the residents over the type of homes that they wanted, the heights they felt comfortable with. So lots of big drawings, lots of walking tours and study models, as you can see on the right, where we were, each month we would bring new options, exploring how the new neighbourhood could be formed. So here's one of the master plan drawings from the earlier stages, showing circa 925 homes arranged over 10 phases, and replacing the 438 existing homes. So the strategy was always to make sure there was no loss of social housing. Very clear mandate and direction from the Mayor's office in Hackney that no one should be forcibly removed from the estate, and everyone who wanted to live on the estate could be rehoused. So 438 council homes replaced, and then additionality as well within the overall mix for new shared ownership homes and key worker rental, and all sorts of other tenures, including market sale, to help pay for the reprovision of the social and affordable homes. So just a little diagram here, just showing the basic master plan strategy, showing a new frontage onto Penn Street and Poole Street, facing onto the park and into the leisure centre and into the area with the schools, and then an east-west neighbourhood route through the middle of the plan, and then north-south pedestrian-friendly, bike-friendly routes that connect the main road to the south through to the canal-side walk and the northern part of the site. And between these routes and streets are individual phases of the master plan, and these could then be developed out by Hackney Council. Here's a slightly more detailed model from about 7 or 8 years ago, showing in detail phases 2, which is the low to medium rise buildings loosely arranged around the courtyard gardens, and then the taller buildings to the southwest, which are market sale, and they help fund the wider part of the project. Some studies here just showing the new emerging landscape and public realm ideas. So active play, play on the way streets, urban gardening, table tennis in the streets, and then on the right, mid-rise homes, The residents were very keen on living in close to the ground in 4, 5, 6-story buildings. Sketches here just showing how we could start to create these mini districts within the Colville neighbourhood, showing sort of townhouses, maisonettes, small apartment buildings, pedestrian and bike friendly streets, active ground floors, giving as many residents as possible a front door onto the street. And then phase 1 was built 12 years ago, and that was a replacement housing block for the first wave of residents to move into. And then phase 2, which is now partially finished. And here's a sketch of from above, showing the phase 2 in colour, mainly to the north. So working around existing constraints such as the underground drainage system and sewerage system, major gas pipes and infrastructure, set up this on this plan, sort of a horizontal service street, and it was too expensive to move those pipes, so we had to work around the existing infrastructure on the site. But you can start to see the north-south routes, pedestrian-friendly routes, being created by the shaping of the buildings. Generally slightly bigger buildings facing the canal edge, slightly wharf side, canal, taking industrial clues from the warehouse district just to the north, and picking up key accents, working with a varied roof line to give the buildings character and townscape qualities that the former buildings didn't have. And then smaller streets of terraces, of maisonettes and townhouses, connecting those apartment buildings and starting to frame the streets and the public realm. Within this is also a big new community centre and a new energy centre as well. So early development sketches from numerous iterations of the project, and how we conceived the various streets and sight lines through the project. This is a diagram just showing how the simple form of the courtyard could be broken down, partly to deal with parking and bike storage and the everyday facts of refuse and recycling, and then wrapping the courtyard form with family housing with up and over maisonettes and townhouses, and then notching into the top of those buildings with roof terraces to create a variety and quality along the street and create incredible rooftop amenity spaces and views for the top floor apartments and maisonettes, and then popping up slightly taller buildings on the corners to increase density and help overall viability of the project. There's a little cutaway sketch inside showing the new garden square that sits above the car parking, and then the fold over maisonettes wrap from the street edge with the front door, and then fold over the car parking edge, and then have living rooms going out into patio gardens on the new landscape. And then upstairs you can see the upper maisonettes with either one very big roof terrace or two on the maisonettes on the left. You'll see two terraces, one facing out into the street, one facing into the garden square. And here's a sectional drawing that connects the two streets from the Neighbourhood street on the right through to Branch Place on the left, the car parking and bike storage below, and then the buildings that fold over the edge. So you never have a exposed car parking edge. You only ever see front doors and kitchen windows and dining rooms onto the streets to give an active landscape and active public realm. And then in a little bit more detail, this is how the dwellings work in the four-story element. So a ground floor maisonette with a wide frontage, and then that pivots to create living spaces, and an additional couple of bedrooms upstairs that then open out onto the patio garden. And then above that sits either a smaller apartment, or sometimes on the right you'll see a family-sized maisonette with the double terrace arrangement. And then This was completed, this phase was completed about 3 years ago and now fully occupied. We used a lovely brick facade, many discussions with the residents over the type of brick, the quality, the texture, the mortar color, and the expression of the windows and how they would be cut into the external elevations, the generosity of those windows as well. And because Hackney were in a way in charge of the master plan process and the detailed design of this phase, they were able to control the budget all the way through the process, which allowed us to work with the highest quality materials, be really generous in the specification and design of the individual homes, and make sure the residents were getting the finest quality of rehousing possible. So example here of one of the upper family-sized maisonettes. So living rooms spilling out into really generous patio areas, and then other patios overlooking the garden and also the wider city. So probably 3 to 4 times the size of an average new build amenity space in a new build dwelling in London. And then inside the garden on the left, the maisonettes that fold over have these lovely patio gardens, screened, protected by a little defensible garden wall and fence, so it allows the residents to put out their flower pots and deck chairs. Lots of light getting into those dwellings. And then on the left of that picture, you'll see the beginning of the communal garden space. And again, I think we used 3 different types of brick on this phase. All the front elevation, the side, and the rear the garden elevations, all using a very, very high quality brickwork and mortar, and the same generosity with the windows and the design of those elevations. And then phase 3, which we designed in collaboration with David Chipperfield's office, started nearly nine years ago. So in order to make the project possible, we had to find cross-subsidy. Hackney and the GLA, and at the time Homes England, did not have the funding to pay for the whole project. And the only way to enable the residents to get their new homes was through a degree of cross-subsidy. So the master plan was very carefully designed to allow for a certain number of private market sale homes to pay for the new build social housing. So phase 3 was designed alongside the master plan and phase 2 very, very closely. The residents were equally involved in this project as they were in the design of their own homes and their own buildings. And it's really key that through the cross subsidy and by Hackney staying in control of the process, we were able to get the maximum value out of this piece of land. We had to go through a number of iterations to develop the form and shape of these buildings. It was at a time when values in this part of London were still quite low, so the buildings have to work quite hard in order to create the cross subsidy. And normal wisdom will say that big square or rectangular buildings are more cost effective and produce the biggest value on a particular site. The difficulty here is we were constrained by so many pieces of underground infrastructure that it made putting rectangular buildings on the site quite difficult. So we went through a whole process of working with a variety of shapes, and you can see the models on the right, the various iterations we went through to try and create a figure of the buildings and an idea for the buildings that would be both work with the site, work with the constraints, create a gateway through, but also create fabulous housing as well. So in a little bit of detail, this is the eventual ground floor plan. 2 plans in detail showing how the apartments the individual apartments are nested into the hexagonal form, and then in building section, the arches on the ground floor were designed to reference the railway arches just to the east of the site from the overground, but also express the quality of the ground floors. So that, again, picking up on this idea of a double height entrance for these buildings as well, and create the idea of a gateway into the new Colville neighbourhood. And then in reality, the buildings were finished about 4 years ago now. So here we used two tones of brick as a Belgian brick in a stack bond, and there's a nice detail in the story. The two bricks are actually the same, from the same clay, and the grey brick is formed from firing the brick twice. So it all starts off as the red brick on the right, and then the grey brick is formed from a second firing in the brick kiln, which creates the two tones of the two individual buildings. And you'll see here the sort of sculptural singular form of each building, with the terraces and balconies carved into that hexagonal form, and then the ribbon windows of the bedrooms, and then the big double height sliding and opening glass frames for the living rooms that have this lovely double aspect. Examples here of the granite cobbles that run from outside. This is from Penn Street, a view over Penn Street. The granite coming in from the pavement and inside the building, and then down into the basement car parking. And then on the right, the cobbles coming into what is just before the cafe has been fitted out on the image on the right. And then examples here of some of the interiors. So you see the open plan kitchen, these great views. This is looking west towards Clerkenwell. And then in a bit of a close-up here of the terraces, and they wrap around, so you get these incredible 150, 160 degree views across the city, and great quality of light that is bounced off the brickwork and into these lovely big double aspect corner living rooms. So to finish, we'd like to share a short extract from a film we made with the residents from a couple of years ago, but we think this sums up the Colville project really well. And I'd just like to say thank you very much for watching and listening today, and very happy to answer any questions afterwards. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Yeah, I've always lived in East London, but mostly I've lived in Hackney. I like this area. This is one of the reasons why I decided not to move out of Hackney and then come back or something like that. You know, I want to be part of the change as well, so that when I am, you know, much older, I can say that I've been here X amount of years. I've seen the changes happening. You know, I've been part of that change. I felt empowered to, you know, I had a voice. And hopefully the same would be for my daughter as well. When she grows up, she can feel that, you know, she grew up on the estate, you know, she has that community feel as well, just as much as I have. It doesn't just bring us together within Colville Estate, it kind of brings us together outside Colville Estate as well.
So thank you very much for the interesting insights. I would like to welcome my two distinguished speakers and guests here, Paul Karakusevic and Kurt Hofstetter. Let me quickly introduce them. Paul, you founded Karakusevic Carson Architects to improve the quality and design of social and public housing and civic buildings. Over the past 20 years, the practice has designed numerous projects, many of them being awarded. Paul is a design advisor to Homes England, the Mayor of London, and the Design Council. He lectures internationally and lends his experience to audits, critics, and award panels of major initiatives and projects across the UK. Welcome, Paul.
Thank you very much.
So, Kurt Hofstetter is the director of the International Building Exhibition IBA Vienna, New Social Housing, that will have its final presentation actually this year. So come to Vienna, there will be an exhibition from June to November. Yeah, and Kurt is an urban planner and was, among other things, head of planning for the northeast region of Vienna and head of landscape planning for the whole of Vienna. In the years 2003 and 2015, he was significantly involved in the concept, planning, development, and implementation of Seestadt Aspern Urban Lakeside. And Kurt is also living in a co-housing there in Aspern. And what is even more interesting, that it was actually the first housing project built in Aspern Seestadt. So he's really one of the pioneers there. Welcome, Kurt.
Thank you, welcome. Thank you for having me.
So thanks to the audience, we have already received a lot of questions, but maybe I allow myself to ask the first question also for our international audience, because London and Vienna are both growing cities and there is quite a huge need for new homes. So both projects talk and show also in the film that this piece of a city or the neighborhood needs to be an inclusive mix in order to work. And so what inclusivity and mixity actually inscribes is the access for everybody to good housing, regardless of basically their financial income or capacity. So for our international audience, I think it would be interesting to hear what are the actual rules, legal frameworks, and also possibility to finance these mixed tenure models. Maybe both of you could just explain on the very project these frameworks or these rules. Do you want to start, Paul, maybe?
Of course, thanks, Iris. I think the local governments that we're working for in London are obviously impassioned by the need to build public housing and also maintain their existing housing stock as well as possible. I think the sector has been rather neglected for many decades previously, so there's a lot of recovery going on. Critical importance obviously is to keep the residents in place, whether it's being through refurbishment or through new build housing, obviously trying to keep the neighbourhoods together. London's clearly a very expensive city, but when residents are living in council or local government housing, their rents are controlled. And the key thing for all of our projects is to try and keep those rents as low as possible, but also then provide the best possible housing. But there is a cap on social rent and council rent that the government imposes, which is about approximately a third of the market sector rent in each district, but it's also capped as well. So that allows for, well, as many people as possible to afford to live in the city and be mixed within the wider neighbourhoods, to avoid problems of dislocation and pushing out to the edges of the city. But it's definitely not a perfect world, and obviously the councils don't have unlimited means, so it's sort of finding the right balance. Thank you.
It's also, there's a question from the audience, and maybe just to add on what you just said, because you said also in the film that there is basically the high-rise buildings generating the density and basically cross-financing the other projects. So the question from the audience is, do you see that this is not possible everywhere? So do you have a solution for this, or?
Hackney were lucky. It's in there was a land value when that project was designed. There was an idea that would generate income for the council to be used across the wider project. Obviously, not every site has that land value. In London, in the last probably 5 years, there has been fresh funding. So that particular project had to be almost self-financing with only sort of partial funding from the mayor's office. There is now much more funding coming down
to the local governments to finance their own projects at the most affordable level possible. It's not always 100% affordable, but they are aiming for that. So some of our new projects are multiple rental levels, but all within the affordable sector. But it's a very delicate balancing act between income, expenditure, rent levels, and obviously keeping the local government offices open. Obviously building homes is extremely expensive. So the money has to come from somewhere.
Thank you. Good.
Yeah, Vienna is a little different when we talk about social housing. Then, in fact, it's more social is different because you could say it's more about societal housing. You have almost 80% of the Viennese people have access to what we call social housing because the income levels are so high. But the system is exactly like Iris said, we're trying to offer it to as many people as possible. So you have a mixture of people in all the different areas of the city, and you don't have too many or too high differences of where people live and how the circumstances are. So the system for that, of course, needs some history, and we're lucky that we still have this history. Otherwise, it wouldn't work. And you, in this way, can get a lot of income from projects that have been started and financed 30 years ago, and there is still some money being paid back. So that is there's always some money you can reinvest. And of course, a lot of these developers are limited profit housing companies. So they can make a little profit, but they cannot take it out. They have to reinvest it, which is kind of a stable factor for moving forward. That's very important to understand. So societal is more the aspect, how do people work together, and how can we always proceed and create innovations in that. What you said, Paul, about this kind of financing from one part to the other, it's very interesting. We have it in a small scale as well. As soon as you are the landowner of both possibilities, then you can manage to do that, and especially innovations and new ideas can be financed in this way for the first time until you know, okay, it works, and then you can bring it on the wider scale. So that's very important.
Do you want to give us maybe an example on Aspern of the different, initiatives which could be cross-financed, or for example, also co-housing is a niche product, but especially in the first phase, there was made quite a lot of land available.
Yeah, in the first phase, we had mainly subsidized housing and quite intense block of co-housing projects, because we wanted to support the fact that many things are not finished in the beginning, and people would see there is a need of this and that and something is missing. So we wanted to have co-housing projects in the beginning, because these people who are able to plan and build their own houses should also be able to find a solution if something is missing and be creative, and they would do so. This was very important in the beginning. Then, of course, it was always the plan to have market financed housing as well. So you have a mix in the whole development. This happened then in the second phase, and now we are going on with a mix of it. What we are just developing now, and what you could see in this little video, was the next part. It's called Seebogen. It's just being finished now, and it's also part of IBA Vienna. And this is a mixture. It's mainly subsidized, but also freely financed.
Okay, and both of you talk about mixed use habitation and how it's important that different uses are basically in close proximity to each other. So basically what you're saying, that it's crucial that the urban plan also works with the housing in a way. And so it's important to understand the processes of the people who are going to move there, the people who are already there, because when there are huge new buildings are coming up in the neighborhood. I mean, there needs to be process for people to understand the value, and then also the site itself is very important to understand to create the identity. And this is also then a question here from the audience. How do you achieve a sense of place, basically, in these large scale developments? And they say, in other words, how do you stop them feeling too sterile? I mean, I think it's probably a question of time as well. But for all these projects, what were crucial moments and revelations also for you? What makes things work or maybe not work? Maybe you can say some words on that. Paul, do you want to start?
Okay, I can start. I think it's the mix aspect is really, really important. I think a lot of the housing estates we're working on, they do provide fabulous housing. Some obviously need some love and investment and refurbishment, and some obviously need some rebuilding. But I think we realized quite early on that a mix of use within the new neighborhoods was really vital to provide local employment, active ground floors, a variety of building types, and to avoid the sort of sterility of just a high density suburb. So we really wanted to avoid that monoculture of pure residential. So in all of the new projects now, our clients and ourselves are really working out how we can incorporate a real range of ground floor uses, and even, you know, not just ground floor, you know, buildings within the neighborhood that offer different uses. And I think 15 years ago, it was very difficult to do that from a financial viability perspective. That's got a little bit easier, but I think we're all realizing that the city needs a real mix. And that's what we're trying to incorporate now in all of the new projects. So,
what is actually the mix in Colville Estate?
It's I mean, probably 95% residential.
Yeah.
There's obviously some community space. We replaced all of the shops. The little estate shops have been rebuilt and re-provided, and the existing businesses have been moved. And there's a new sort of community-focused cafe that's just been moved in. But it sits within a much wider neighbourhood of leisure, 2 schools, and mixed-use buildings within, you know, a couple of 100 meters. So it is part of a wider neighbourhood. It's not just its own place.
Sure. Yeah. Sure. This is different in Aspern in a way, because it's.
Yeah, in Aspern we had in the first phase it was about 90% residential, so it was quite a lot. Then in the second part it was less than half, and in the third part now we have about 75 to 80%, if it's just the buildings and if you don't count the schools and things like that. I think the most important things are offering space, and more of that, even offering possibilities. And this has to do with car traffic. This is the crucial part. If you can reduce car traffic, if you can reduce parking in the open space, then you have the possibilities to create possibilities. You don't have to define everything in the beginning, because people will then articulate what they need. But if there's no space, they cannot do anything. And also, if you can manage to bring the like parking, if you don't go out of your flat, go down with the lift in the garage and leave the house. If you have to go out to get to your car, what we're doing here, then you meet people on the streets, then you pass the shops, then you might take the bus because it's closer even than your car. And this is the key aspect for creating some kind of neighborhood, some kind of slowing down in the public space and creating space for new ideas, for something else that can happen. So it sounds simple. On the other hand, it's very difficult. We had a lot of fighting in the first year when we offered space that we said, oh, that's a space for you. You can decide what you want to do there. And people decided to put their cars on. So all the pavements were just filled with cars. And it was unbelievable. We just had 3 centimeters of pavement just to make it easy for everybody to walk there. And it was just taken by cars. So 1 year of fighting. And to make clear, this was not the idea of create what you need. So please use the garage, it's empty. And then we have the chance to do something else. So this process also has to take part, but it's worth it. And yeah, then it's a process of understanding each other and understanding how the city can work.
Mm-hmm. Very interesting to talk about the framework and its, let's say, gaps or possibilities, also adjustments and so on. So I have another question from the audience, which I bring in here. The question is, speaking of scale, how the decision made about the mix of low-rise and higher-rise buildings in each phase? I mean, in Aspern, I think maybe it's...
Well, if you see the first master plan, there is almost no high-rise building, or just very few in some special corners, and it developed very quickly afterwards, also done by the master planner, but with some discussion that it would make sense to have more high-rise building, to even have more density because of the use of public transport. So we have the underground. Underground was there before the first house was finished, which was very unique, but it made it possible to reduce the car traffic because nobody could say, I need the car. There was always the underground there already. And to make even better use of that, it makes sense to increase the density a little, and that led to these discussions.
Okay, we have 3 minutes left, so I would like to ask the last question. Going back to the idea, to the theme today of the core of people and housing, and talking about housing again. So it's a very personal question probably, but you know, we are facing climate change, maybe food production is going to be changing. What do we do with water resources and migration? So what do you think will be the answer really of housing? Will it change? Will it stay same in an architectural way? How are we going, actually what Eva is asking, how are we going to live together tomorrow, or let's say in 20 or in 50 years? So I would be really interested how you see a positive future scenario.
Kurt, do you want to go first?
No, you're fine.
I think from a personal, I think density and density within the neighborhood is a really, really interesting one. I think creating a critical mass, creating local facilities, creating housing that lasts for hundreds of years is probably the most sustainable form of new buildings. And I think solidity and generosity and delight, I think, are key for me in the design and making of new housing. And I think obviously in a post-COVID climate, I think there is an ambition from all of our clients and also from our residents to make everything just a little bit bigger, be more generous, more, you know, bigger bedrooms, more storage space, bigger living rooms, flexibility within the plan so you can work from home, kids can do their schoolwork, more open space, more terraces, and that is now starting to feed into the next wave of projects already.
But
Thank you.
Do you think it will, in 50 years, we will live completely different, like cluster housing, or, you know?
I think there's opportunities for all types of, from the nuclear family to all types of different co-housing and co-living. But I think it's just, for me, it's all about the quality of the design and the quality of the making of the new homes is really fundamental. But it is exciting that there are a range of opportunities now that maybe weren't 25 years ago.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good. 1 minute.
Yeah, I think there is no really picture how we will live, but we should allow more possibilities how people would like to live and make it possible so that they can do what they're aiming for, because there's so much creativity in it. And what Paul said, the flexibility, we could see it in Corona now, where people are suddenly bound to the just small flats, and they have to do something and have to be flexible. So that's a big challenge, and I really inviting everybody to come to Vienna to see the International Building Exhibition from June to November. There is a lot of examples to really look at that as well.
Okay. Unfortunately, I have to stop this interesting discussion. Thanks a lot to my speakers. Thanks a lot for the questions from the audience, and enjoy the rest of the festival. Goodbye from London and Vienna.
Goodbye. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.